Suicide is painless. I can take or leave it if I please.
Welcome back to the Titanium Hanger. This is Mike. Today I want to talk to you about the M.A.S.H TV series that ran from 1972 to 1983. This was based on a 3-year Korean War, but spawned 11 seasons. Timing was everything because it was coming out during Vietnam. And it was very culturally relevant. It was a comedy with a dark cloud looming over it the whole time. People could relate to it. They could relate to it then, and the things going on today, you can relate to it. Now, we're going to talk about this TV show. We're going to talk a little bit about the movie, and we're going to discuss that it has cultural relevance today. Coming up. Originally started out as a novel in 1968, written by Richard Hooker, the pen name of a former military surgeon. And with the assistance of a writer, W.C. Hines, it's notable as the foundation of the M.A.S.H franchise. Now, then it spawned the 1970 feature film. Now, the film had a more serious, darker tone to it than the actual television show. And even though it was lighthearted and funny at times, the overall presence of the situation they were in, because they were in a war, that was always there. It was always present. But it was way more serious in the movie. But there's so many similarities. If you enjoy the television show, you'll enjoy the movie. As for the television show itself, it was lighthearted. It was funny. And I've got to admit that I was introduced to it at age 13. Although it's been around my whole life, I wasn't really watching it or paying attention to it until I was 13. And I went to go visit some friends in Arlington, Texas. We went to Six Flags, and when we came back, one of the kids that was a little older than me was watching the show every night and explaining the comedy to me. It's over my head at the age 13. But it's nowadays way more relevant, and I appreciate it so much more as an adult. There's constantly adult humor, sexual innuendos, and as some people say, it was more fun in the early days and got more serious closer to the end of the series, as they could see that they could get away with covering even darker material on the TV show and still grow ratings. They just wanted to be fun and lighthearted in the early years. But there's always a dark cloud overshadowing this. See, one of the major points with this, absolutely nobody wanted to be over there. See, the relevance is the fact that citizens pay for poor decisions made by politicians. And this is how they cope with it. They cope with being in a horrible situation they have no control over by drinking, which is a big part of the show, and it is kind of funny the way they do that themselves. And they make their own alcohol, and they crack a lot of jokes, they play pranks, they do a lot of fun stuff, but ultimately the show won because of the characters and the actors that made it happen. Captain Benjamin Franklin Hawkeye Pierce, played by Donald Sutherland in the 1970 movie, but Alan Alda brought so much to this role. He did a fantastic job. When I think about M.A.S.H, I actually just think about Alan Alda and his character and how he brought it to life and how he had such perfect comedic timing. He was able to execute each line without any coaching or being told what to do. And it just seemed to perfectly flow and work. Hawkeye is one of those characters that was through all 11 seasons and was there for every episode. And actually, I can't really imagine an episode without him. But there were other actors that came and went for various reasons. They replaced characters. But yet this character, don't watch the last episode. You're not going to like it. Unless you've already seen it. But it was one of the top episodes. But it was a bittersweet ending. Well, bitter ending. But such a great character, Pierce had little tolerance for military red tape and protocol, feeling that they get in the way of doing his job, and has little respect for most regular Army personnel. Captain Trapper John Francis Xavier McIntyre, who appears in the novels and in the film was played by Elliot Gould, and in the TV show played by Wayne Rogers. There was also a spin-off of the show that didn't get picked up, but This was another great character. Of course, you had to have both of them having fun together. Hawkeye and Trapper having a lot of fun in their time off after 12 or 15 hours with surgery. Hawkeye and Trapper were given roughly equal focus, but in the TV series, the character devolved to become more of a sidekick to the character Hawkeye. And you kind of see that. You kind of see him taking second fiddle, but it's still kind of fun to have him around. He was constantly playing jokes on the likes of Frank Burns and Hot Lips, and we'll get into talking about those characters here in a bit. But he eventually was replaced by a newly created character, B.J. Honeycutt, which was a more serious character, less lighthearted and fun, but they still had a fun side to that character. B.J. Honeycutt did take part in several pranks and schemes and sort of filled the role, but he was more of a devoted husband and father, missed his wife and daughter, and that was his whole storyline, his whole role there. It does say that he did have some sort of a fling, and I have to say that you do notice a difference in tone from this character from the Trapper character. Now, Lieutenant Colonel Henry Braymore Blake. He was played in the 1970s movie by Roger Bowen, and in the TV show, McLean Stevenson performed this character that had really no leadership qualities to him whatsoever, and that was the funny part of the character. And of course, a lot of people would say, well, that kind of reminds me of a boss that I've had, or something along those lines, but he was able to pull off that role very well. Yet another character. All these characters, none of them wanted to be there. None of them wanted to be part of this horrible situation that they were thrust into, and doing whatever they can to survive. But Henry's a good man, a capable surgeon, but unfocused and often ineffective as a commanding officer. Colonel Sherman Tecumseh Potter. Sherman T. Potter was a much more viable leader than what we had before. So he was going to replace, and he did replace, Henry Blake as commanding officer of the M.A.S.H 4077. And the character actually appeared in 3 subsequent sequels. It's played by Harry Morgan, and very serious. He's had a lot of history with many different wars, various wars, so he has experience, and this is someone that you would really need in the show and on the front lines. Potter was created as a different type of commanding officer than his predecessor as a career officer and close to retirement. But despite his stern military bearing, Potter's relatively relaxed and laid-back commander, not above involving himself in camp hijinks and understanding the need of fun and games to boost morale. Frank Burns and Hot Lips Houlihan. This was the comedic couple. It really didn't make a whole lot of sense when you watch it. When I watched it, what does she see in him? Why did she like this guy? He was the character of a bumbling idiot. It was kind of like he had no competence to it, but played by Robert Duvall, he actually did a good job. He did a good job creating a character, or playing a character, portraying a character that everybody seemed to hate. He wasn't very competent, and he even thought he was better than he was. The weird thing is that they gave this character absolutely no character development, which was bad, and eventually was written out of the show because it was a stagnant role and nobody really liked him. But they could have given this character some development. He could have grown a bit as time went by, but that's not what happened. Major Margaret J. Hot Lips Houlihan actually grew as a character. In the 1970s film, was played by Sally Kellerman in the TV show Loretta Swit. But she was a head nurse who grew as time went by. She actually showed that she wanted to be a good officer. She wanted to be a good woman that's going to go as far as she can in what she called the man's army. But she did work very hard at the end of the series, or closer to the series, as character development. And she tries to shed that Hot Lips persona that she had in the early part of the series with her and that Frank Burns situation. But every time a commanding officer would visit the M.A.S.H 4077, it seemed like she had some sort of history with them, if you know what I mean. Major Charles Emerson Winchester III is a supporting character in the television show, played by David Ogden Stiers, and his character was introduced in the 6th season as a replacement for Frank Burns. He also did not care for Hawkeye and BJ. The thing was that he was more of a refined type of intelligent, humane, kind person, and he really didn't take to all of the antics, BJ and Hawkeye. And with that, it was kind of a fun contrast that they were to introduce in season 6. But after a while, he started to show his dry sense of humor and practical jokes against his bunkmates. Corporal Walter Eugene Radar O'Reilly, he actually appeared as the same actor, Gary Burghoff, played not only in the 1970 movie, he also played in the TV show and was also in the After M.A.S.H and starred in the pilot of Walter, which was not picked up. This is a different kind of character than any of them on the show. Radar was a great character both in the movie and in the TV show. He, of course, was a younger character, and with that, he had sort of a naivete to himself, and he looked towards both of his bosses as father figures. Henry Blake, he was always anticipating Henry Blake's every move, like what he needed next before Henry Blake knew he needed it. And when he moved on to Sherman Potter, he did a good job for him also. But it's sort of a lot of growth happened with this character, but close to the end of it, the actual actor himself felt that it was getting in the way of his personal life, and he no longer wanted to do it. He actually wanted to drop his commitment down to 13 episodes per season until eventually he wanted to quit. But Radar, great character, and everybody loves him. First Lieutenant Father John Patrick Francis Mulcahy. Of course, he was the chaplain in there. He was played by William Christopher for the majority of the show, and he did a great job. And it's one of those where he was always doing the right thing, doing the good thing, but he did kind of do a few things, as in saving the orphanage. He would also gamble a little bit, but he was in one of the episodes, he was running a race, and he kind of talked the other runner into forfeiting so that they could win the money to save the orphanage. Schemes like that, and so he does fit into this world very well. And of course, nobody wants to be over there, including him, but he makes the best of it the best way he can. So Klinger is an interesting character, as he dresses up in women's clothes to more or less try to say he's crazy and needs to get sent home. Now, there was supposed to be a different part of that storyline early on, but they kind of veered away from that the first few episodes and just went with the whole he's cross-dressing to say that there's something wrong with him so that he would get sent home. Of course, it didn't work, although he kept trying to do it, and he kept trying to get the psychiatrist to send him home. He just kept with it. Until later on in the season, his role sort of changed once we lost Radar. He took over Radar's duties. He seemed to be a little bit more serious, but he was also in on the scheming and planning, and he's always trying to make a buck. Maybe that's what I liked about Klinger the most. M.A.S.H was a great show and a sensation for the time, still relevant today. People enjoy watching it. I believe it's still on reruns somewhere on some channel, but let me know what you think about the television show from the 70s and 80s. Like and subscribe, and Ted Hanger out.